1990. The FBI cancels its own contract. The pistols it had ordered by the thousands, built to fix the worst tactical failure in Bureau history, are still trickling out of the factory, and headquarters has already decided it doesn't want them anymore. Only a fraction of the guns it paid for were ever delivered before the deal was scrapped. That's not a footnote. That's a death sentence, handed down by the very agency that had crowned this cartridge its official service round barely a year earlier. Every gun magazine in the country read it the same way. The 10mm auto was finished, a hot rod experiment that flamed out, soon to vanish from factory catalogues entirely, the way dozens of failed cartridges had vanished before it. It didn't vanish. Not that year, not the next decade, not ever. And the story of how around the FBI itself tried to bury, kept climbing back out of the ground, is one of the strangest survival stories in American firearms history. To understand why it refused to die, you have to go back further than Miami, further than the Bureau, to two men in Southern California who set out to replace the most beloved handgun cartridge in the country. Thomas Dornus and Michael Dixon formed their company in December of 1979 with an audacious goal: build the heir to the Colt 45 Auto, a design that had ruled American service handguns since before either man's father was born. In January of 1980, hunting for the best technical advice they could find, they landed on Colonel Jeff Cooper, founder of Gunsight Academy and the man most responsible for modern defensive pistol doctrine. Cooper, as it turned out, was already chasing the same idea from a different angle, and some accounts trace the underlying concept back even further. To conversations a guns and ammo editor named Whit Collins was having about a harder-hitting auto cartridge nearly a decade earlier. Whatever its deepest roots, the partnership between Cooper and the two Californians was immediate. Cooper supplied the ballistic philosophy. He wanted a round, splitting the difference between the flat-shooting 9mm and the heavy, slower 45, something he initially called the 40 Special. Norma, the Swedish ammunition house, took his specifications and, in the process of turning them into a working cartridge, pushed the power well past what Cooper had originally asked for. What came out the other end in 1983 was the 10mm auto, a case built to carry the flat trajectory of an auto pistol round with something close to the raw energy of a Magnum revolver cartridge. The gun built to fire it was the Bren 10, named as a tribute to the Czech city of Brno and Britain's Enfield arsenal. Its bones borrowed from the CZ-75 and reinforced to handle far more pressure than that pistol was ever built for. It launched with genuine fanfare and the backing of the most respected shooting instructor in the country. The company needed operating capital badly enough that its original plan was to sell 2,000 Jeff Cooper commemorative editions at $2,000 apiece. A price point that mostly failed to attract buyers, forcing a standard model onto the market at $200 instead, plus a dual master version with a spare slide and barrel in 45 AP for another $300. For a moment, despite the shaky finances underneath it, the Bren 10 looked like the future of the American service pistol. Then, the guns started breaking. Cheap investment castings meant slides that cracked under recoil. Magazines that had been promised on day one weren't ready for months, and some customers received pistols with no magazines at all, just a promise that more would come. The company that had set out to dethrone the 1911 couldn't even reliably ship a complete handgun. By 1986, Dornus and Dixon Enterprises was bankrupt, having built somewhere around 1,500 pistols in its entire 3-year existence. The gun that introduced the 10mm to the world was gone almost as fast as it had arrived. By every normal rule of the firearms market, that should have been the end of the story. A cartridge with no factory chambering it left, born out of a company that no longer existed, trying to compete against decades of entrenched 45 and 9mm infrastructure. Cartridges have died from far less than that. This one got a reprieve, and it came from an unlikely direction. Colt, custodian of the very 1911 the Bren 10 had been built to replace, made the unexpected decision to chamber its own 1911 pattern pistol, the Delta Elite, for the 10mm auto, keeping it in production across nearly a decade of that first generation alone. It wasn't framed as a triumphant relaunch. It was closer to a lifeline thrown almost by accident. Firearms historians generally agree that without Colt's decision, the round would likely have slipped into obscurity as a strange footnote of the 1980s, remembered only by the handful of collectors chasing an increasingly rare Bren 10. Instead, the cartridge kept a pulse, sustained now by the very company whose flagship pistol it had once threatened to make obsolete. For a brief stretch between the Bren 10's collapse and Colt's decision, the cartridge was, by most honest accounts, just about dead. The only gun ever built around it had gone bankrupt. No major manufacturer had committed to it. Ammunition existed mostly in warehouses, produced for a customer base that had effectively stopped existing. If Colt had made a different call in 1987, there is a real chance this entire story ends there. In a bankruptcy filing, with the 10mm auto remembered the way collectors remember any number of clever 1980s cartridges that never found a second act. Then came Miami. On the morning of April 11th, 1986, 8 FBI agents moved to arrest 2 armed robbery and murder suspects in Dade County, Florida. Men who had spent months robbing armored cars and banks across South Florida and were riding armed with a Ruger Mini 14 rifle. What followed became one of the most exhaustively studied gunfights in American law enforcement history. More than 140 rounds were exchanged in the span of minutes. 2 agents were killed. 5 more were wounded. In the after-action review, investigators zeroed in on a single damning detail. A 9mm round fired early in the fight had struck one of the suspects and stopped roughly an inch short of his heart, allowing him to keep fighting for minutes longer than anyone expected. Agents on scene, largely armed with revolvers and underpowered semi-automatics against a rifle-armed opponent, found themselves outgunned and underpenetrating at the same time. The Bureau's response was sweeping. Revolvers were phased out as primary duty weapons almost entirely. Ammunition doctrine was rewritten from first principles. And after years of testing, the FBI's Firearms Training Unit landed on the one cartridge already carrying a reputation for ferocious terminal performance: the 10mm auto. In 1989, the Bureau announced it would field a purpose-built duty pistol chambered for it, awarding Smith & Wesson a contract for the Model 1076. For a cartridge that had watched its only manufacturer collapse into bankruptcy 3 years earlier, this was vindication almost beyond imagining. The most powerful law enforcement agency in the country had chosen it, by name, as the direct answer to the worst day in its modern history. It lasted barely 3 years. The same full power loading that made the 10mm so devastating downrange made it just as punishing in the hand. Recoil was heavy, muzzle blast was sharp, and agents, especially smaller-statured and female agents, struggled to control the pistol and struggled even harder to qualify with it consistently under stress. Bureau ballisticians tried to solve this by downloading the round, eventually settling on a lighter 180-grain bullet moving at somewhere between 850 and 950 feet per second, well below what the cartridge was originally designed to do. But a reduced powder charge inside a case sized for a much larger one left dead airspace that hurt pressure consistency and accuracy alike. So, Smith & Wesson's engineers did something more permanent. They shortened the 10mm case itself, trimming away the wasted volume, and built an entirely new cartridge sized specifically around the lighter load the Bureau actually wanted to shoot. They called it the 40 S&W. By around 1990, the FBI had adopted it, and for the next 2 decades, it would become the default sidearm caliber for police departments across the entire country. The 10mm, in other words, had done exactly the job it was hired to do and been discarded anyway, replaced by its own downsized offspring, built specifically to erase everything that made the original difficult to shoot. This is the part of the story most gun writers stop at. Adopted, in glory, dumped within years, survived only by a smaller, tamer child that stole its spotlight. Case closed. Cartridge dead. Except it wasn't. And the reason it wasn't is easy to miss. Because it happened quietly, off to the side of the FBI's spotlight entirely. In 1991, the very window when the Bureau was formally walking away from it, Glock introduced a full-size pistol chambered for the 10mm auto. It wasn't pitched as a comeback, and it wasn't riding the FBI's name. It was a steady, unglamorous addition to a growing lineup, and it kept selling in small but consistent numbers to a customer the Bureau's qualification scores had never accounted for. Hunters and backcountry travelers who noticed that this cartridge, ballistically, sat close to a .357 Magnum revolver round, but arrived in an auto-loading pistol that reloaded in seconds instead of the slow, one cartridge at a time, reload a Magnum revolver demanded under pressure. For anyone walking through grizzly country with a pack on their back, that difference mattered more than any training bulletin out of Quantico. So, while the mainstream gun press moved on, treating the 10mm as a cautionary tale from a failed FBI experiment, small pockets of shooters kept it alive entirely on their own terms. Colt kept the Delta Elite in its catalogue through multiple generations. Glock kept building and refining its 10mm platform through the 1990s, largely unnoticed by anyone outside a narrow circle of hunters and handloaders. Smaller ammunition companies kept producing full power loads that nobody in a police procurement office was asking for anymore, selling them almost exclusively to the enthusiasts and outdoorsmen who'd never stopped believing in the cartridge in the first place. Across nearly 3 decades, the 10mm auto never had a single year of true, total discontinuation. It simply stopped being anyone's headline. That quiet persistence is exactly what let it come roaring back. Starting in the 2010s, a new generation of hard-cast hunting bullets and modern powder technology gave the 10mm a second life as a dedicated bear defense round. Embraced across Alaska, Montana, and the rest of bear country by hunters and guides who wanted magnum-level penetration, without a 6-shot revolver's slow, deliberate reload. The original Glock 10mm became the standard against which every new challenger would be measured, and the lineup around it grew to include compact and long-slide variants built specifically for hunting and predator defense. Smith & Wesson answered with its own striker-fired 10mm. Sig Sauer built a modular full-size platform around the cartridge. And Springfield Armory and Dan Wesson each followed with their own high-capacity 10mm pistols, every one of them built for a market that gun writers had confidently declared extinct a generation earlier. Some voices in the hunting and backcountry defense community now argue the round has overtaken the .44 Magnum as the go-to sidearm for predator defense. A claim still working its way through the record, and one that would have sounded absurd to say out loud in 1992. Walk into a well-stocked gun shop today, and the difference is obvious. A Glock in 10mm now sits in a display case next to compact carry versions and long-barreled hunting models, priced within a few dollars of the same maker's 9mm offerings. A gap that would have seemed impossible in the 1990s, when 10mm ammunition was scarce enough that owning the pistol meant becoming your own ammunition supplier through handloading. Specialty ammunition makers now build entire product lines around hard-cast, deep-penetrating bullets aimed squarely at hunters and backcountry guides, rather than police departments. A customer base the cartridge's original designers never specifically planned for, but one that turned out to want exactly what the round had always offered. None of this happened because a marketing department revived a dead brand. It happened because the people who actually needed that specific combination of power, capacity, and reliability never stopped buying it, even during the years when doing so meant searching out a niche manufacturer instead of walking into any big-box sporting goods store. Here is the part worth sitting with. Every cartridge that truly dies for the same simple reason. Nobody keeps building guns for it, and nobody keeps loading ammunition for it. The 10mm auto never crossed that line, not even once. Even at its lowest point, its birth pistol bankrupt, the FBI publicly walking away, the gun press writing its epitaph in real time, there was always at least one factory pistol you could buy chambered for it, and at least one company still willing to load rounds for it to fire. That is not survival by accident. That is a cartridge that earned just enough believers in just enough dark years to never actually go extinct. The FBI didn't kill the 10mm auto in 1990. It just stopped watching, and in all the years while nobody with a badge was paying attention. The round quietly proved it never needed the Bureau's approval to stay alive in the first place.